Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. So in my previous video I explained how the empire of bullshit comes about by just infiltration by the intelligence agencies, and now I would like to put it more concretely about what the empire of bullshit looks like in real terms, and I apologize in advance for the language. I just can't help but get extremely frustrated. So the situation that we have now is that people like myself and like many other engineers, entrepreneurs, doctors, single moms and many other people are essentially pushed down through the actions of the intelligence agencies by interposing a layer of gang stalkers and harassment personnel that push us down by putting us way essentially below these criminals and other criminals who basically run human experimentation programs, but also by the courts who have been infiltrated by the police, heads of police and police officers who have been infiltrated by the intelligence agencies are essentially not acting the way they should. So the situation that has arisen, for example, in my case, is that in 2011, when I was up here, I was, so this I always call the bottom layer of society. So essentially people who are uneducated, unskilled, unmotivated and don't have very much integrity. So I certainly was a layer above that. I was a fellow at Oxford. And then after that I was trying to start a company, but then what happened is that I was essentially pulled down by having a layer of gang stalkers interposed. I was harassed, I was stalked everywhere, my private and intimate life was commented on. I had essentially 24-hour surveillance non-stop since November 2011. I saw a bunch of old guys basically sexually titillate themselves with voyeuristic, essentially perving and stalking and harassment and putting on stupid little shows and all that for an entire year in Oxford. I had break-ins into my home, or one break-in into my home, there in Oxford in 2012. Then this entire thing followed me to Germany. Then I tried to start a company. I was already kind of like, I couldn't really do the things that I would have been able to do it if people left me at my level. So I was trying to bootstart the company from literally bottom up and try to push up. But instead of allowing me to make that transition and actually pull this off, instead I was pushed down even further. Essentially I was frustrated. I spent an entire, I think, a year and a half in Germany trying to bootstrap this company. I had police officers try to intimidate me at business meetings. That was the police officer Elisabeth Sombruch, for example, from the Munich art department, who magically appeared at the, I think it was the meetup for female entrepreneurs in science and technology. So she infiltrated that meeting with another agent. The other agent followed me to other meetings like the Lean Startup, harassed me. These people, I mean, especially the other agent, they are so incredibly thick, I can't actually put it across to you. They are essentially the bottom layer of society. So when they're stalking you and trying to infiltrate, it's obvious. So you essentially notice it frustrates you, you get disconcerted, you can't do your work, and bit by bit, essentially the German intelligence agencies managed to pull me down even further than the British intelligence agencies. Then they started pushing me down even further by infiltrating my medical care, by, you know, harassing me. Then I started being irradiated, so my health was diminished. When I returned to the UK, I was shot into the neck with electromagnetic weapons. Then, you know, here in Switzerland there was the second break-in, demonstrative breaking into the home. I started being irradiated even harder when I said that I'm going to report that to the police. My family started being attacked, that already in Germany. My friends started being attacked, and now, by now, I am irradiated non-stop. And as I'm giving this talk here, one of the things that you cannot see is essentially that I am being irradiated, which causes me a non-stop headache. So if I put my hands close to my head, I can feel roughly there, about somewhere there, and I think somewhere there, another beam. And these beams essentially track me around. So one is coming from a neighbor somewhere down there, and another beam is coming from the side and is impinging on my head. And these two beams essentially cross over inside my head. So this is now the empire of bullshit in the year 2011. Already 2016 I was irradiated non-stop. I was mutilated. It's saying I am being mutilated inside my home in Switzerland. When I tried to flee to Germany, I was mutilated even harder, stalked even harder, mocked by German intelligence. When I went back to the UK, I was irradiated again, very brutally to the head. Here, when I was trying to talk to the police, to the German ambassador, asking for help, they all rejected any sort of assistance. The police, the criminal police in Switzerland, the Attorney General in the UK, the police in the UK, the police in Germany, the federal police, and so on and so on and so on. In the end, the Investigatory Powers Tribunal in the UK rejected any assistance, and in the end, the High Court. So now I have tried it all, and basically I have been pushed down. And what we're now looking at, I've just briefly summarized what has happened to me, because that is essentially typical. It is typical for the people who have been pushed down, basically way below their status. So in a sense, all these victims should be here or up here by now, but instead they're literally lower than the bottom of society, because they are also exposed to a criminal element, and they are being medically mutilated. Essentially, their physiological integrity is being mutilated, their business endeavors are actively being destroyed by essentially people who are the absolute dregs of society, and one criminal layer below that. So we are at the mercy of them. We are down here. So by the time this happened in a society, and it seems to have happened in all Western nations, in every single one, I have cases of essentially irradiation with these microwave weapons from Poland, Japan. I know people from France, Belgium, the UK, US, lots, right? Here I am in Switzerland, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Basically, there doesn't seem to be a country that is not in this empire of bullshit at the moment, thanks to the intelligence agencies. So what we now have essentially is entirely because of the sabotage, the societal sabotage, infiltration and general degradation by the intelligence agencies. They have managed to, as far as I can tell, single-handedly destroy our societies through that. When I went public, after that I received I went public in early December, December 2016, I received so many desperate pleas for help, stories, absolutely horrific stories, how, you know, a single mother of an autistic child is being attacked, the autistic child is being attacked as well. Anybody who's a child with autism knows how hard life is already. And then you have a bunch of essentially degenerate morons and weaponized idiots, and, you know, impinging on your life. And meanwhile, you have, you know, police officers and judges and lawyers refusing to help. So that essentially puts them into the dregs of society as well. They are also utter scum by just rejecting help. So this is now the situation we're dealing with. I, like many other victims, am being shot into. I had my body shot into, especially my head shot into last night. I woke up with my head being absolutely cooked at full blast with microwave beams that pass through walls. And this is essentially happening to thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands and hundred thousands of people in our Western societies. And the question is, how could it have come to this? Well, it came to this simply because of the infiltration action by the intelligence agencies, and I tried to explain that in the previous video. The question is now, once we're in this empire of bullshit, which I think you agree this is what this is, what are we going to do about it? And this is what I would like to talk to you about in this video. So the problem we're dealing with is that people like me and other professionals and single mothers and so on are being attacked in the most brutal fashion. I personally tried to approach all sorts of charities, the big human rights charities. All of them knew about these cases. None of them were willing to help. And that's the outrageous thing. Every single place I called, they had already heard about attacks with electromagnetic weapons and microwave weapons, yet they refused to do anything about that. And for me personally, that's already essentially guilty by association. Or, you know, there's a crime that's ongoing. Certainly in Germany, I learned at school that this is already a criminal offense. If you know that there's a crime happening and ongoing in process, and you do not do anything about that, then you are yourself guilty by allowing that, knowingly, willingly allowing that to happen. Now, I myself have now tested with all the big human rights charities that this is the case. They actively refuse and have refused presumably for absolutely years, if not decades, to actually help these people. You know, and now I'm a victim myself. The same is also true of the entirety of the mainstream press in the UK and in Germany. They all refuse to report about it. So essentially what we have now is that crimes against humanity are being committed. People are not safe in their own home anymore. And the press refuses to report about that. And also the human rights charities don't do anything. The police still tries to stamp us with mental health. This is utter bullshit. And it is bullshit simply because we now know that 70% of the victims are women. 70%. This has already been reported for the US in 2010. Since then, I have confirmed that by or with the heads of two charities and two organizations that help victims. So they both confirmed, yes, as far as we can tell, the vast majority are women. Now, that is not national security. It's not even schizophrenia or paranoia, which is what most people are being smeared with, because schizophrenia and paranoia are predominantly male. So that's 60% male diseases. So the sufferers are 60% male. In contrast, we have 70% female victims. That looks much more like sexual violence and essentially war crimes. And this is precisely what you would expect in the empire of bullshit, where utter, corrupt, degenerates and psychopaths have been placed, empowered above productive people. Now, what we essentially have is the total collapse of our society. And we should also remember that, you know, as we're in the state now, in practice, what we have is essentially Chinese and Russian intelligence watching us, absolutely, utterly laughing themselves to bits over this. Because this is hilarious. We essentially have our renowned intelligence agencies in Germany and big MI5 and MI6 essentially single-handedly driving the country into the ground. There's no other way to put it. Or when you actually meet the victims and actually find out who these people are, they are always people of high integrity. Always. Because they have to be. Because the people who don't have high integrity are the perpetrators. Right? So this is what's happening. This is an absolutely dreadful state, but now the question is, what are we going to do about this, essentially? So this was just a brief description for those who you know, are new to the topic and wonder what on earth this is about. We have essentially psychopaths and criminals running a bunch of degenerate, weaponized morons down here who are harassing people non-stop. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? This is essentially it, right? And meanwhile, we've got some leaders up there, so-called leaders, who could be anything, who are, these are not like angel wings, although I'm sure that they think, ooh, they're just flying towards, you know, the heavens in their absolute amazingness. But in the meantime, there's this big drop. This is around them. These are essentially Potemkin villages, a facade of just, you know, pomp and circumstance. And meanwhile, there's this sharp drop down to where society overall actually is. The same is also happening in businesses. You have the business leaders who think, oh, they run these amazing organizations. And the top tier of management, which by that time is already infested with utter idiots and corrupt psychopaths, you know, they pretend, oh yes, we're so amazing, we're up here. They create this facade of, you know, modified numbers, yes, share price, and ooh, it's all amazing. And in real terms, the company is already, you know, bottom at the, you know, at the bottom end of things. And meanwhile, you have these people living in their own little bubble that was created by other people. So the question is, how the hell to break out of this? And I spent now, you know, over 10 minutes repeating all this, because this is what you have to be aware of. This is what we're dealing with. We now have a situation in the Western world where people are shot to bits with microwave weapons inside their own home. Some of them have implants, some of them have been infected with certain viruses that are tested on them. They are literally being mutilated to death in their own home. And meanwhile, the police and other organizations don't do anything. They're incredibly corrupt. You just can't get through, and it looks like everything is lost. And as we speak, this is sliding lower and lower, because these people are essentially attacking more and more and more people. You know, they start attacking judges who are trying to speak out, lawyers, and it just goes on and on and on and on like that. So what are we going to do about it? Here it is. This is now the plan. So you have to realize what this is based on. You know, first of all, where do we want to be? Well, we have to be, you know, we have to take these people who all have been attacked, and I would take all attacked individuals, all of them, right? And essentially realize that the system, this corrupt system, for us has already identified the people of high integrity. They have done the work for us. So what I would do is take these people individually and place them back where they belong, which is up here and above these morons, whoever they are. This could be placing a person, if this is now a corrupt judge, or this is a corrupt editor of a newspaper, right? Their income might be higher, you know, it might be up here at this level, but actual their, you know, mental capabilities and their integrity and the actual performance, you know, for society is here way below. It's in essentially the dregs of society. So if you've got an editor of a newspaper who's essentially just printing propaganda and preventing actual crimes against humanity, which are ongoing in his country, from being reported, well, you can't think that he's up here. He's in the dregs of society. So what you have to do is take the victims and place them back above these people where they belong, and do it with absolutely everybody, right? How do you do this? How do you get them back? Well, first of all, you have to restore their finances. You have to restore their finances, number one. The way I would do it is to open crowdfunding for every single victim. Every single victim has to have a personal crowdfunding website, and the community has to make sure that the crowdfunding website actually attracts enough funding. We have to start with that. Their finances need to be restored. Second of all, their reputation needs to be restored. And not just restored to just, oh, nobody level. No, they have to be recognized for who they are, which is essentially abuse victims who have borne the abuse, the human experimentation, in some cases for decades. Now that essentially is like, in terms of achievement, on par with the Navy SEALs, right? Because you have been tortured and you haven't, if you're still alive, you haven't cracked. You haven't killed yourself. You couldn't be killed off despite their best attempts. So what this means is you are truly an amazing person. So you're not on par with a corrupt editor of a mainstream newspaper. You are above them. And if you manage to do something alongside of your targeting, you are way above them. These people just got high salaries and printed crap in their newspapers. Well, that's not hard, right? But you did something amazing. So you have to be restored. So I would say point number one, crowdfunding websites. You know, and we now start an actual process of restoring their finances and giving people back the income. So we will do that. We'll do this in a transparent way, and we'll make sure, we have to make sure that these people get restored, because they spent a lifetime of hell, right? They have to be restored and they have to be compensated, and the compensation has to come from the courts. So what we have to do is essentially cycle back the system and force these corrupt judges to actually do their job as it's required. We have to force them back up out of their corruption, and we have to recapture them and turn them into honest people. So we have to essentially restore society, right? And that's actually not as hard as you think, because if you kick out a corrupt judge and you replace him with someone of integrity, that is instantly bouncing somebody back up. So it can go, literally, it can go with one sacking and replacing it with someone with integrity. And there's another way to do it. If you keep this person and you have the entire world watching that court case and making absolutely sure that that judge understands that if his judgment is going to be rubbish, that he will pay the price for the rest of his life. Every future promotion will be mired by the knowledge that in a case of crimes against humanity, he wasn't willing to actually do justice to the victim, right? So you can also force a corrupt person to act with integrity, which is almost like having somebody with integrity, right, back up by essentially forcing them to act with integrity. Okay, so now I'm giving you the actual general outline of what we're going to do. Okay, the other thing is also that some people are physically damaged, right? They have cancer as a result of the of the weapons and so on, many other horrific injuries. Their social circle has suffered. We have to restore everybody in every other way, also in terms of their reputation and in terms of their regard in society. We have to bring them back up to where they belonged, and then beyond that to where they belong now by having endured that without flipping, because most people in society couldn't do that. So this is the plan, and for that we have to know who the victims are. If a victim just continues suffering in silence down here, we'll never know about them. If they never open a crowdfunding website, we can never restore their finances, right? If they never join a court case, they can never be compensated by a court. They'll always stay, and I mean, we have to clear out these stupid, you know, criminal thugs as well, and we have to lock them up. But until we get there, until we get every last criminal thug harassing a victim, these victims have to come forward, because only when they become public can we actually lift them back up, you know, back out of their misery. So this is what has to happen. And also people's health has to be restored. And the health is crucial. There are ways to cure cancer. There are ways to actually get back to health. There really are ways. And we know that a lot of the actual insight from medicine have been withheld. And that basically has to be stopped, right? We have to uncover all this. And we are, as mankind, we are actually ratcheting towards that, right? There's other ways to restore people to health as well. And a lot of it is also psychological, by just getting them out of these essentially individual concentration camps where the intelligence agencies have placed them, right? So that's one thing. But in terms of health, another really crucial aspect is also we have to force the intelligence agencies who have the files. They know what human experiment has been done on these people. They know what implants they have. They know what has been done. We need to force them to give these to the victims. Every victim has a right to know what has clandestinely, illegally been done to them. It's a crime against humanity with lasting consequences. The intelligence agencies absolutely steadfastly refused to cooperate, even when these crimes became public. By now we have this ridiculous state where we have literally thousands of people complaining on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on other social media about their targeting, and the intelligence agencies are so utterly degenerate, they still don't get it. They still don't stop. I don't know of any certified case where people have stopped the harassment. With people, I mean the intelligence agencies. I don't know of a single case. Now with that already, the intelligence agencies have gambled away any sort of trust or even regard we should have for them. That is truly an organization out of control. Now, an organization out of control does not have any rights. It does not operate within its statutory bounds anymore. And we know that the statutory bounds have been manipulated and distorted. But now we've got a situation where people are stuck in individual concentration camps inside their home. We know about it, it's public. A large fraction of what the implants are, how they can grow inside their bodies, how the microwave weapons work, what sort of brain, screwing, idiotic bullshit experiments are being run on them. Despite all this, the intelligence agencies continue. And my full public appeals to the heads of British and German intelligence are an evidence of that. They know I've got lots of evidence because they played out the Muppet Show in front of my eyes. Yet they are not willing to stop my targeting. Last night again I was cooked. Today continuously I'm cooked. I can't actually use 2 rooms in my home because they have huge windows and I am being irradiated from my neighbors. There's a beam, typically actually 2 beams overcrossing inside my head that follow me around the home. I know for a fact the last couple of months that these beams started. At first they were erratic as I was pacing up and down through my flat because the thickness of the walls was, varying as I was going along. But now a learning algorithm has essentially corrected that, so I've got the same headache that only slightly moves about as the beams correct in my head as I go from here to my kitchen and back. Right? But I can figure out how the technology works. It's not a rocket. I also have measurements up online showing just over Christmas how German intelligence literally tried to cook my head right? And how they have different beams impinging on my head. By the way, that little measuring device, the Acousticom 2, the EM Fields Acousticom, has been stolen from my flat just the last 2 days. So it was I think the day when I drove to have my car repaired in Germany, and I was even saying, oh, okay, now I'm driving, and you know, if an accident happens to me, please blame the German intelligence for that, because it was in Germany I had my car repaired, and after that these problems started happening, interestingly. And then I go again to have my car repaired again. By the time I come back, this measuring device is gone from my flat. Now that's very interesting. Anyway, these things keep happening, right? So how are we gonna go out of this empire of bullshit? Well, this is how we're gonna do it. And the other thing is also, so this is now the overview, and in the next video I'll go into details and how exactly, I'll give you an actual breakdown of how on earth to come out of this. So this is number one, but we're going to do another thing, which is something that you have to do, because what this essentially is, I mean, you saw, I am now rotating the system. All these people who are here, I'm rotating them back up. So what I'm essentially doing with this is a system cycle. We are cycling the system. We're putting the intelligent people back up to where they actually belong, and we're putting the dregs of society back to where they belong. And we put the criminals in our society where they belong, which is in jail, and the corrupt police officers just the same, and corrupt judges out. You know, this is what we're doing. So this is a system cycle. But for system cycle to work, if this is what you do, and I explained in detail how we're going to restore the victims, we have to first of all remember that there are many more victims. Children have been trafficked. I've heard children are still in captivity from the trafficking, are kept essentially, I suspect, in underground facilities, in homes, kept locked up, you know, exploited, sexually exploited, some of them also, I think, murdered, you know, and horrific things are still ongoing because of this, essentially. The total corruption of our society as the empire of bullshit formed. Now, if you want to cycle out of the empire of bullshit, one of the things you have to do is do a system broadcast. And this means, unfortunately, our newspapers are captured. So they're down here, they're the dregs of society, so they're useless. So we have to use any other means to achieve the system broadcast, because the fact that we're cycling the system has to reach every last corner of our society. That's when it works, because then people realize, oh my God, this criminality has happened. Once they know about the criminality, don't worry, rely on them helping you with the system cycle, because everybody hates corruption. Everybody hates criminality. Only 1% of our societies are psychopaths. Yes, people can be corrupted, but if they have an option to have, you know, essentially an easier life and calmer life by not worrying about the fact when their corruption will be uncovered, people always go for the easiest thing. And actually a stable, safe society is a lot less stressful than one where there's non-stop crime, corruption, you can't rely on anything, backstabbing, psychopaths. You know, that's a stressful world, and anybody who's ever lived in a third world country knows that this is pretty stressful. So if you have a choice of living in a third world country where your handbag can be stolen just as you go to your car, you know, or anything, necklace might be ripped off your neck as you're literally just crossing 3 meters from your safe compound to your car parked on the street, these people know that this is not very safe. It's better to live in countries like Switzerland where, you know, in some places you can still leave your door unlocked, you know, and everything will be fine. So if people have a choice between living in non-stop stress in, you know, gangsterland, and even gangsters, honestly, believe me, they would prefer just an easy life, right? So always worrying about having a bullet to the back of your head is also not a lifestyle that people really want to retire with. So in a sense, once we do a system cycle, everything will be better, because in a sense, if you are, as the empire of bullshit is created, more and more stupid people fill the ranks, and the only way for our society is down, right? The people up here, the leaders, they might feel like, oh yeah, we're doing all these futuristic projects, we're going to Mars, and we're going like we're doing self-driving cars. Amazing. But the reality is, you have created the empire of bullshit, and whilst you are dreaming with your little crowd of cronies about, oh, how you're going to settle Mars, meanwhile, society is collapsing under you. Open brackets, another thing that's also an artifact of this is that our ecosystems are collapsing around us. right? And that's because some of these business leaders were rather corrupt and poisoned the environment, and corrupt judges didn't really persecute these corrupt business leaders. So, you know, the toxins kept being pumped. And oh yes, and other business leaders poisoned the employees. They started having cancer, and no. And this entire thing just dies. And it really is like flying a Boeing, and then suddenly it just goes into a nosedive, right? The crazy person who essentially elbowed the you know, pilot to one side and says, oh yeah, I'm so amazing, I'm just like, you know, Mr. Global, I like it, I like, you know, bullshit essentially, I like criminality and I like all these things. Yeah, what you're doing is essentially turning your society into free fall, and this like sensation of just floating in air and everything is like amazing, that's an artifact of you essentially being in free fall. When you just look relative to the floor of the plane, it looks like you're freaking floating up into the sky, but you're actually not. You're not floating anywhere, you're nosediving down in free fall, and everything around you also goes at the same speed in free fall. It looks like you're floating in the air cabin and you might think you're the most amazing person, but in fact it is free fall, and that's what we're in now. The empire of bullshit is creating free fall for society. If you're the leader up there and you think you're amazing, you're an idiot. What you are is deluded by the Potemkin villagers and the facade the corrupt cronies you hired put up around you. Yeah, your life could be amazing, but then please only say I'm a psychopath living in a little bubble, and then you would be spot on. If you claim to be an amazing business leader, you haven't actually didn't go outside and look on the ground. My recommendation to you is dress up in disguise, pretend to be literally the lowest of your employees, and check out how your company really looks, right? Kings and other leaders in the past have done just that, to break out of this, essentially, you know, the happy facade put up around you by your corrupt cronies. You have to break out and you have to see what it really looks like, and you have to be honest about it, and then you see how deep the drop is. So this is the empire of bullshit, nosedive, right? In the moment when it's free fall and everybody starts floating, right, people can believe they are like so amazing, but really overall you're not on solid ground. There is no traction. The plane doesn't actually, you know, in overall terms, doesn't actually get you any higher. In contrast, if you keep promoting, you know, intelligent people who then also are altruistic and help the people below, either by spreading their knowledge or by creating companies that create jobs, or by improving the environment, or by just coming up with novel ways for clean energy and so on, and you allow a healthy system where information can spread freely, people are respected, even if you don't see their value, you respect them because you realize that actually a society is based on interactions. We are a GLUONIC society. So the interactions, you know, they are the ones that count. And sometimes a person who's utterly uneducated can be inspiring to somebody who's highly educated, and vice versa, right? So if you allow people, all people, to be healthy and try to bring out the maximum in them, it doesn't matter if they're on this level, or that level, you try to get the maximum out of everybody. What you essentially create is an uplift, right? So that is the exact opposite. Here, you achieve free fall with the empire of bullshit. If you do the opposite, and you actually try to cycle to a better system, whereby people support each other, well, with altruism, essentially what you're creating is a society that climbs higher and higher, but the entire base climbs with you. So what you're doing is then you are a leader, right, and you have genuinely intelligent advisors, and below that you have a tier of genuinely, and a multitude of genuinely creative and entrepreneurs, genuinely creative scientists, and so on, right? And you keep the criminals, the actual criminals, as far down as you can, and the corrupt people and the psychopaths. Well, then you can't really drop down. All you can do is essentially move up together with everybody. So as everybody's moving up, so are you. So what you're creating is essentially a society with trend up. And even if one person should just drop off, right, someone else can take their place. but it doesn't really, you know, there is no way for you to collapse down. So what the system cycle is about is not removing, you know, the leaders in the world. It is not about that. It's not about killing anybody. It's not about taking anybody's wealth away. Remember, because what you had in wealth was most of the time an illusion. Okay? A very, very small pool. It's like a speck. When we're talking about really serious wealth, it's not backed up by an actual engine, and it's the system that's the driving engine. If this engine is diving, sooner or later it will start pulling you as well, because your investments are going down, because your military capabilities are going down, because your societal protections around you are going down, and then you have free fall. With this, you keep going up, and essentially the rules to follow for the system cycle are very easy. Very, very easy. And actually, you can start with, first of all, take the people who are now unjustly at the very bottom and put them back to where they are. Have them compensated. And by doing that, you already picked the hardiest people. Now, these people managed to survive under concentration camp conditions. So now just imagine what these people can do if you just let them go. It's like having a horse that has always been like held back in the races as far back as possible, and it still manages to keep up and still manages to run. Now just imagine what that horse can do if you let go. If you just let go and actually feed it properly. Because all these years of training, because this is essentially what it is for the victims of the intelligence agencies, it is essentially resilience training. To just get through your day, you essentially have to be a Navy SEAL, right? Every single day. You will be shot at, you'll be, you know, essentially physically disintegrated, and you still have to continue. You have to deal with sleep deprivation. That's a war zone, right? You are in a freaking war zone. You're being shot at, for God's sake, non-stop, right? So this is it. This is what we have to do to pivot out of the empire of bullshit, and also it has to be a global pivot, because remember, this is happening all around the world. Now, you can't actually lift the system, because essentially if you forgive me saying so, the shit here is spreading into other countries. These intelligence agencies are international, they're interlinking with other agencies, being just as corrupt as they are. We have these roving hordes of mercenaries who are essentially trained in sabotage and so on and so on. So if you don't want that, you have to have a global cycle out of the empire of bullshit. A global pivot. And the pivot is actually surprisingly easy to do. It is literally sometimes as easy as just letting go the reins of a horse and just letting it run. So this is now the announcement of the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit. This is the rough idea of what we're going to do. And remember, with these victims who have to be lifted back up, I do not just mean the victims of the intelligence agencies, you know, as like I, for example, and others like me. I also mean the children who have been abused, but I also mean the people who are essentially the victims of financial terrorism. The people who lost their homes, who lost their jobs, who had all these horrific injustices due to fraud and crime done to them. We are now cycling the system, and we are gonna essentially do it ourselves. And if you manage to get one level up, it is your duty to take somebody else and help them. Because through this, we're literally going to ratchet up bit by bit by helping each other. So this is the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit. In the second part, I'll explain in detail of how to do this. Thank you for listening, and please watch the second part to actually see my suggestion for the recipe. Thank you very much, and bye for now.